Hi guys, welcome to my very first YouTube video. Today I'll be making a comic, which is really great because this was one of my goals when I started drawing again after a very long time. The comic is only a page long, but I think it's a really great start and is a good preparation for making a longer one day. What's really important when you're making a comic is that you know up front what you want to do. Otherwise, whenever you want to make changes, it's going to be a huge mess. So it was really important that I knew exactly up front what I wanted to have as a layout. So first I made up the layout and I already had an idea for the story in that moment. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that's how I designed the layout. And here I'm showing you exactly how I did the first panel. First I went in and made a sketch in Procreate. Then afterwards I went in with the inking, and I'm using a dip pen for this. Just a regular deleter dip pen with the smallest nib. I really like that one. It's a bit stiff, but it can really make very thin lines, and I really like it for this sort of thing. The ink I'm using is Speedball super black ink, just a standard really black comic ink, and it worked really well for this. And in this case I had to make all the patterns by hand, of course, so this took quite a long time, and this is why I sped up the video a bit more with this and cut out some so that you don't have to watch me make every single line. And now I'm coming to panel 2, and this was a bit more involved as a sketch. So I drew a ship for the first time. I don't know when the last time was that I drew a ship, but it's a very long time ago and I was never very good at it. But I think I did reasonably okay. At the back the perspective is a tiny little bit off, but that's fine. It doesn't have to be super perfect, to be honest. With perspective I'm still learning a lot, and well, you gotta make some mistakes to learn from them, right? So still inking, and the lines here were giving me a bit of trouble too, because they had to be sort of straight, and I'm not that used to working with dip pens. This is part of Inktober. Sorry for my head, by the way, it pops in every now and then, but inking is very stressful sometimes, so sometimes you just have to get a better angle at it, otherwise you mess it up. This was part of Inktober. I decided to make one panel each day for one day of Inktober, because it was a perfect opportunity to practice my dip pen inking. Every one of these panels took me about 45 minutes, at least for the first draw. Maybe this one a bit longer, to be honest, because of the many lines, and then I had to go in with the background too, which was also very involved. As you can see, there's lots of tiny little wiggles and lines and all that, and then the sky took even longer because I really wanted to have a stormy looking sky, and I wanted to have large contrast areas and try to make everything stand out as much as possible. This is really, when you're working with black and white, it's really the most important thing, to have the contrast be right so that you can discern what's going on. Without those pops of red color, it's actually impossible to see the tentacles, so it was really important to use color in this too. For the third panel, I decided to make the background black, even though it doesn't look like it in the other panel. I just thought it would make a nice contrast to the other panels and give this panel a little bit more interest. So I filled in the background with my Pentel pocket brush, which is really quite a good pen for filling in large areas with proper black. Then afterwards I went in with white ink, which is Daler Rowney Bleed Proof White Luma. Although this is actually quite alright if you make it thick, you can't really make it thick enough to use it with a dip pen. So it wasn't quite opaque when I used it with the dip pen. Nevertheless, I quite like the effect that it gives when it's not quite opaque. Now, the 4th panel was supposed to be a bit bigger, and you can see now that there's actually a 5th panel coming. So far I've only seen the 4 panels, and you could have suspected that there would be only 4 panels, but there will be a 5th. You can see in this panel that things don't go particularly well for the bear. The octopus has him hanging out there. It was a little cruel, and his bird is flying away. Oh well, things don't go well for him. But maybe the 5th panel will bring a happy ending, who knows? So, another incentive to watch this video to the end, I suppose. I decided to go along with this panel like with the other 2 panels, and I'll repeat some of the patterns that I already used in the other panels. In this case, I'm just going in and doing all the line work first, which is really helpful to establish where things are, and, well, hopefully you don't mess things up, but while you're just making one panel or one picture and you mess up the line work of that particular picture and the main characters, then you might as well stop at that point and start from the beginning. So starting with the line work for the characters is always a good idea. This also explains why making a comic like this, a whole page in traditional media, is quite stressful, because if you mess up one of the panels, you basically can start the whole page from scratch again, at least if you want to have the original be consistent. I scanned the page after every single panel, so I basically always had a scan to fall back on if I messed something up or spilled the ink or did something else really stupid. It really helps to have this digital backup, to be honest. I also really liked that I could do the sketching in Procreate, because like this I could try out different patterns without having to erase things or try things out in pencil first and then erase things and make the paper go bad, or, well, it was just really useful to have Procreate to make the first layout for the whole page, instead of going in not really knowing where I'm going and maybe doing a whole lot of sketches on paper and having to draw things again and again. In this case, I could just change up the pattern of the sky, or change up the pattern of the water, or, for example, with the octopus in the 3rd panel and the black background, I first had it the other way around, and I liked it this way better after trying around with it a bit more. So trying things out digitally before going in and doing it in traditional media is really a nice opportunity to have. What you basically don't want to happen is that you mess up the final page just because you didn't make the sketches that you needed to make before starting out. And this gets even more important when you're working on a longer comic, because if you start painting or drawing or whatever before you actually know what's going to happen, you might have to change the entire layout of a single page, or a change in one page might affect something that you've already drawn before. And then you just waste a whole lot of time if you don't know what you're doing up front. So it's really important to have a good plan when you're making a comic. And with a page like this, it's not so difficult to have the whole story already planned out, but with something longer, it could get a lot more difficult. For the last panel, I wanted a dramatic reversal of the bear's fate. Well, he's saved. It was just a dream. A bit of a cop-out, but oh well. I liked the idea, and it also related to one of the drawings I had made before about the bear and the octopus, in which the bear is actually bringing the octopus flowers. So, well, for people who had already followed my drawings before, they could expect that maybe things are not as bad as they seem in the first few panels. So, actually, the bear's just having a bad dream, which is probably caused by having a wet tentacle wrapped around him. But well, I really like this octopus and bear story. It's so mad. I don't know how I came up with it. Maybe it was sketchbook proximity of a bear sketch and an octopus sketch. In any case, I had lots of fun with it. Well, to speak about the materials here, I'm actually using Inktense blocks for the lining. I've been experimenting with line work in different colors, and I often had problems finding all the colors I needed, because I normally want the colors to be a darker version of the colors that I will be using for the coloring. So I need a lot of colors, and usually liners simply don't have the amount of colors I need for them. This means with a lot of colors, I need something like Faber-Castell pit pens, or which are brush pens, or in this case I'm using the dip pen with Inktense blocks. Also excuse that my hair seems to be in the picture a lot in this. I was filming from a higher position with this panel, and apparently my head got under the camera a lot. I'm sorry about that. As I was saying, this was actually a piece for Inktober, like every other panel in this. And technically speaking, I was cheating a little bit, because normally you're only supposed to use ink. But since I had done a drawing with the octopus and the bear before, and that was with watercolor, I decided to not take it that seriously that I was supposed to use ink and just use watercolor anyway. In the end, I did the inking with the dip pen, and that's what I wanted to practice for Inktober, so I think it's alright. I don't need to be so strict with the rules, I think. The palette I used for this was a minimal palette, in this case Phthalo Blue red shade, I believe, Pyrrole red, and Hansa yellow. And well, I always use Payne's grey, even when I'm painting with a minimal palette. It's just a really simple way of controlling the tonal values, so it makes things a lot easier. I wasn't very sure whether the watercolors would really work with the ink work I had done on the other panels, but I think in the end it fits really well together, and it gives this really nice contrast that marks the difference in quality of the story for the dream and the reality. So the reality is all, well, supposed reality. I mean, it's a bear and an octopus. You know, reality is relative. It gives the supposedly real panel of this story a real aspect with the color, whereas the black and white marks it as different and as the dream. So I think that was a good idea, and I think it turned out really nicely. I like all the different textures I could get with the plain old black and white inking, the red highlights, and the red also didn't clash too badly with the rest of the colors. When making a comic, it's really important to have all the different aesthetic elements of the comic be consistent with each other, so that you can see it's the same story and it's the same characters. The characters always have to look the same and have the same facial expressions, or range of facial expressions at least. And this can be really difficult depending on what kind of story you're telling. And the colors can really help to make things work together, or they could make things worse and make it difficult to let the style be consistent. With black and white, there are also different inking styles, and if you stray too much from the original style, then you might confuse the reader and they might not even know what's going on or who's being portrayed. Maybe they don't recognize the characters anymore. So when you start making a comic, you have to already know the style you want to work in. You can't just change in between. So as I said before, planning is really, really important. With one page, it's relatively easy to make things seem consistent. For example, how I did it here by keeping some of the patterns the same in the sea or the sky. But when you're making a longer story, this can actually be really difficult, and you have to really think up front what kind of styles and methods you're going to employ to make the story seem like a consistent unity. I hope you found it interesting to watch me make this comic, and maybe this inspires you to try the same thing for yourself. Maybe start with one page, and then later on you can drawing something 4 pages and eventually a whole long comic. So, in any case, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. I don't know when that's coming, but it will be coming. So watch out for that. Bye!